It was in the early spring of 89, when the soot of London lay like a thin veil upon the day, that I first heard Holmes speak of the jewel they call the cat's eye, a green stone with a living fire that seemed to shift whenever the light touched it. Holmes and I sat in our familiar rooms at Baker Street, the cold grate breathing warmth, while outside the hansoms rattled and the vendors called, and within, quote, the violin case lay open, as if it too listened for trouble.
You are watching the street, Watson, but you are not observing it in any useful fashion, for your mind is still upon your hospital accounts and yesterday's dull argument with Stamford.
I confess I started, for I had not spoken Stamford's name aloud, yet Holmes looked up from his chemical apparatus with that airy certainty which always made my own thoughts feel loudly booted. The table before him held a shallow dish of crystals and a spirit lamp, and a faint, sharp tang of reagents threaded the room, mixing oddly with the comforting scent of tea that Mrs. Hudson had recently brought. I had been at the window, idly noting passers-by, and had not suspected that Holmes had once more been reading the invisible page of my expression with his detestable ease. Yet it was not long before events drew my attention from my own embarrassment, for the bell below rang with uncommon urgency, and Mrs. Hudson's steps hurried upon the stair.
Mr. Holmes, sir, there is a lady below with a veil, and she says the matter is most immediate, and she will not be put off, not for kings, nor doctors, nor the whole of Scotland Yard.
Show her up, Mrs. Hudson, and if she carries lavender upon her gloves, do ask her not to wave them about my experiments.
Mrs. Hudson gave me that long-suffering look which a mother grants to a gifted and impossible child, and withdrew, returning in moments with our visitor.
Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I have come because the name of my family is at stake, and because a thing of great value has vanished under my roof as if it had grown wings and flown through locked doors.
She was tall and finely made, and though her face was half hidden by a dark veil, could see a proud line of chin and the whiteness of her hand upon the rail. Her gown was rich yet restrained, the sort of elegance that disdains shouting, and there clung to her the faint perfume of violet and something sharper, perhaps anxiety, which has its own odor.
Pray be seated, madam, and if you will permit it, remove the veil, for it is tiresome to speak to a mystery while another mystery sits in front of it.
You are direct to the point, Mr. Holmes, and so I shall endeavour to be the same, though my hands tremble, and I do not thank you for noticing it before I have confessed as much.
She lifted the veil, and I saw a woman in her late 20s with grey eyes that held a steady courage in spite of their fatigue.
I am Lady Adelaide Winterbourne of Winterbourne House in Kensington, and last evening, during a small gathering of respectable friends, my husband's heirloom, the cat's eye, was stolen from the cabinet where it has lain for 3 generations.
The cat's eye, yes, the stone the papers whisper of, and which the jewellers of Hatton Garden describe in reverent tones, as if it were a saint's relic rather than a bauble cut by human hands.
I do not care what the papers whisper, Mr. Holmes, but I care very much what my husband will believe, for the cabinet was locked and the key was in my own possession.
Holmes leaned back, steepling his long fingers, his eyes half-lidded in that curious posture which I had come to recognize as intense attention wearing the mask of languor.
You held the key all evening, yet the jewel is gone. Which suggests either that your key is not singular, or that the cabinet did not require a key at all for the person who opened it.
There is no second key, Mr. Holmes, and the cabinet is a French piece with a trick mechanism, which I alone was shown when my husband placed the jewel in my care.
Then we shall begin, as ever, with the simplest facts, for everything is elementary until sentiment muddies the water, and sentiment, madam, is always the first refuge of those who dislike the truth.
Lady Winterbourne stiffened at that, but she did not retreat, which impressed me, for many clients recoil when Holmes treats their distress as an inconvenience.
If you mean that you will accuse me, Mr. Riday, Holmes, then do so plainly and be done, for I have come here to be saved from suspicion, not to be taught the manners of a laboratory.
I mean that I will accuse no one until the evidence demands it. But I will question you as if you were guilty, because only then will the innocent facts stand up and announce themselves.
I could not help admiring that method, harsh as it sounded, for Holmes had taught me more than once that politeness is a poor lantern in dark corridors.
Tell me of the cabinet, of the room, of the guests, and do not omit what you consider trivial, for the world is mostly made of trivialities arranged into a trap.
The cabinet stands in my husband's study, a room that overlooks the garden, with two tall windows and a single door opening into the gallery. Last evening we entertained only 8 besides ourselves: Sir Lionel Greaves, Mrs. Greaves, Mr. Greaves, Mr. Percival Shaw, the art dealer, Miss Helena Shaw, his sister Colonel Rookwood, Reverend Giles Merriweather, and my maid Elsie, who served the tea.
Holmes's eyes flickered, quick as a bird's, when she named the maid, and I made a mental note, telling myself that I too would learn to value such small things.
The maid served tea, yet you count her among the guests, which implies she moved freely and unremarked, the most dangerous condition for any person in any house.
Elsie has been with me 2 years and is as honest as any girl can be who has only her wages to hold, her upright in this city.
Your faith is touching, but we are not discussing your heart, madam. We are discussing your jewel, and jewels, I have observed, tend to loosen the morals of saints.
Lady Winterbourne coloured, yet forced herself to continue, and I could hear us beneath her composure the fear of scandal, a dread far keener in her world than any dread of thieves.
At 9 o'clock, we gathered in the drawing room, and the study door remained open, for my husband wished to display certain prints he has acquired. The cabinet was closed, and the cat's eye lay within its velvet niche, for earlier in the day I checked it myself, as I always do when we have visitors.
You checked it earlier, which suggests you anticipated danger, which suggests you have had a warning, which suggests someone has been speaking of it beyond the walls of your house.
I received a letter 2 days ago, Mr. Holmes, with no signature, saying only, "The cat's eye will blink for me," and I burned it because I believed it a cruel jest.
Shunts? Holmes nodded once, as if the anonymous line had neatly snapped into a larger picture that only he could see.
The phrase is theatrical, Watson, and the hand that writes theatrically often lives theatrically, which means we shall not confine ourselves to drawing rooms.
I felt a thrill at that, for any mention of movement beyond Baker Street promised action, and action, I confess, is the tonic of my nature.
Continue, Lady Winterbourne, and tell me precisely when you discovered the loss, and precisely who had the opportunity to be alone with the cabinet.
At 10:30, my husband and Sir Lionel went to the study to view the newest print, and I followed some minutes later, for I heard my husband call my name. The men were standing near the desk, but the cabinet door stood ajar, and the velvet niche was empty, and I knew at once that the cat's eye was gone.
She clasped her hands tightly then, and though her voice remained steady, her knuckles whitened as if she struggled not to break.
And what did you do, madam, in that first hot moment when foolish people ruin evidence with tears and wise people freeze the room as if it were a crime scene?
I confess I did not freeze it, Mr. Cooler, Holmes, for I cried out and everyone came running, and in an instant the study was full of voices and footsteps and the smell of panic.
Excellent. Then we shall have to work harder, which will amuse me. And we shall begin by visiting your house before memory becomes more imaginative than fact.
Lady Winterbourne leaned forward, hope and terror mingled in her gaze, as if Holmes were both surgeon and judge.
You will come at once, Mr. Into the Daily Display, Holmes, because my husband has already sent for the police, and I dread what they will say and what the morning papers will do with it.
I will come at once, madam, but understand me clearly. Scotland Yard will suspect the obvious, and the obvious is often wrong, yet it is wrong in a manner that destroys reputations. Therefore, if you wish my help, you will grant me authority in your house for the next few hours, and you will permit me to question your guests and servants without interference.
I will grant anything you ask, Mr. Bold, Mr. Holmes, if only you return the cat's eye and keep my family from becoming the jest of every club in Pall Mall. Mal.
Within minutes, we were in our courts. Holmes with his long grey scarf and his curious mixture of haste and calm, and I with that loyal readiness which, though it has led me into danger, I have never regretted.
Bring your notebook, Watson, and do try, for once, to describe what you see rather than what you think you ought to have seen.
His rebuke, gently delivered, struck true, and I resolved that this time I would be an observer, who not merely a chronicler who arrives after Holmes has already harvested the field. A hansom carried us through the grimy arteries of London to Kensington, where Winterbourne House rose behind iron railings like a dignified prisoner. As we were shown into the gallery, I saw at once that the household was in turmoil, servants whispering in corners, and in the study beyond, the bulky figure of a policeman in blue stood like an accusation. Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I presume. And I'll tell you plain, sir, we've got a straightforward matter of a missing jewel and too many fingers in the room, which usually means the nearest hand took it.
Inspector, your mind is like a shovel, useful for moving earth, but disastrous for delicate work. So kindly stand aside while I look at what you have trampled.
The inspector bristled, but Lady Winterbourne's anxious nod gave Holmes precedence, and my companion stepped into the study with the silent certainty of a man entering his natural habitat.
Watson, note the scent in the air, note the ash on the rug, and note, above all, that the cabinet is open not by force, but by familiarity.
And I bent as Holmes bent, and as I inhaled, I caught, beneath smoke and furniture polish, a faint anemone musk, as though some creature had recently been held close. The cabinet, a bossy piece with gilded trim, showed no scratches near its lock, yet the velvet inside bore a slight indentation where the jewel had lain.
Observe that indentation, Watson, and observe the minute green fleck at its edge, for even a jewel leaves a signature when removed in haste.
I stared where he pointed, and indeed there was a speck, scarcely more than dust, which glimmered when the lamplight struck it.
Now, the question becomes not merely who wanted the cat's eye, but who had the composure to take it while a house full of people chattered within a few yards. Lady Winterbourne, take me to your maid, and inspector, if you wish to be useful, prevent anyone from leaving the premises until I say otherwise.
The inspector muttered, yet complied, and Lady Winterbourne led us toward the servants' corridor, while I felt the case tighten like a noose. Holmes's stride was unhurried, but his eyes moved constantly, counting door frames, reading scuffs, and collecting the silent testimony of the house.
Watson, you see the scratch marks low upon this pantry door? And you think careless broom, but I think claws, and claws suggest a cat, and a cat suggests a purpose.
Before I could frame a reply that met his standard of 30 characters and did not embarrass me, a thin cry sounded from within the kitchen, half gasp and half sob.
My lady, I swear by my mother's grave I never touched your jewel, and if anyone says I did, they are lying wickedly, because I would sooner cut off my own hands than bring ruin upon this house.
Holmes lifted a finger for silence, and in that instant, as the maid's frightened eyes darted to the corner, I saw a wicker basket shift as though something living stirred within.
There is your cat, Watson, and I would wager my violin it has more to say about the cat's eye than any of these respectable mouths.
Holmes stepped toward the basket, and as he did, a sleek black cat sprang out, its gaze bright and unsettling, and around its neck, to my astonishment, hung a torn scrap of green velvet.
Elementary, Watson, that the jewel has travelled by a path no one thought to watch. And now we shall learn who taught the cat to be a thief.
In the cat's unblinking stare, I felt the first true chill of the adventure, for it was as if the house itself had turned its eye upon us and dared us to follow. Holmes's hand moved with surprising gentleness as he crouched, not to seize the cat, but to offer it his knuckles to scent, as though they were old acquaintances rather than rivals in a crime.
A creature does not trust a hurried hand, Watson, and criminals are much the same, for both fear being snatched when they least expect it.
The black cat sniffed him, whiskers twitching, and allowed Holmes to slip his fingers beneath the ribbon at its throat, drawing free the torn green velvet scrap.
This velvet is cut from the cabinet lining, and it is torn, not trimmed, which means the animal caught it while the drawer was open and the jewel removed with speed.
That cap belongs to the cook's boy, Mr. Holmes, and it has never been allowed in the study, not once, not in all the months that has prowled our kitchens.
How? Cats go where they please, madam. But they do not learn to steal a jewel unless a human mind has first imagined the lesson.
The maid, Elsie, hovered near the doorway, wringing her apron, her fear plain enough. Yet Holmes did not look at her with suspicion so much as with curiosity.
Elsie, your shoes are damp with garden earth, and your sleeves carry the faintest trace of ash, which suggests you have been outside, near the glass house stove, within the past hour.
I went to fetch herbs for the cook, sir, and the glass house is warm, and the ashes cling to everything, and I swear again I did no wrong, though I know swearing is cheap.
Cheap indeed, yet occasionally useful. Now tell me, did you ever see anyone feed this cat something finer than kitchen scraps? Something like cream served in a saucer, as if the animal were a guest?
Miss Helena Shaw feeds it cream, sir, when she visits, and she laughs when it rubs against her skirts, and she says it has the cleverest eyes in London.
Holmes's head tilted slightly, and I recognized the motion as the click of an internal lock, one more tumbler falling into place.
Miss Helena Shaw, the art dealer's sister, a visitor with leisure. Wise, and leisure is often the disguise of mischief. Where is she now, Lady Winterbourne?
In the drawing room with the others, Mr. Holmes. Though I cannot believe you mean to imply that Helena would stoop to theft, for she is gentle and reads poetry aloud.
Poetry is no shield against appetite, madam, and gentle voices often conceal sharp intentions. So let us hear what she has to say before we decide what she is.
We returned to the drawing room, where the air was thick with restrained outrage and the sugary scent of untouched tea. The guests sat like figures in a painting of discomfort, Sir Lionel red-faced and indignant, Colonel Rookwood stiff as a ramrod, Reverend Merryweather pale with moral distress, and Mr. Stress, Percival Shaw, smoothing his moustache as if stroking his own nerves.
Good evening again, ladies and gentlemen, and I ask your pardon for interrupting your indignation, but it will keep, whereas evidence has a regrettable habit of vanishing.
This is outrageous, Holmes. Absolutely outrageous. To be detained here like pickpockets when we are people of standing and have done nothing but accept hospitality.
Your standing is precisely what makes you dangerous, Sir Lionel, because standing provides cover, and criminals love nothing so much as cover.
The Lionel sputtered, but Holmes turned smoothly to a slender young woman by the fireplace, whose hands lay folded in her lap with an air of practiced serenity.
Mr. Mr. Holmes, if you have come to accuse me, pray do it quickly, for I find prolonged suspense far more distressing than a direct insult delivered with conviction.
Admire your clarity, Miss Shaw, and I will repay it with my own. You have been feeding a black cat in this house, and that cat has carried away a scrap of velvet torn from the jewel cabinet.
I have fed the cat, certainly, because it is a hungry creature. And it seems to me no sin to be kind to an animal merely because human beings are so often unkind to each other.
Kindness is admirable, yet training is another matter. And you have the hands of someone accustomed to handling delicate objects, not merely saucers of cream.
Miss Shaw's eyes narrowed a fraction, and in that fraction I sensed a sharper mind than Lady Winterbourne wished to admit.
You think my hands give me away, Mr. Holmes, but your own hands are stained with chemicals, and yet you do not confess to poisoning anyone who displeases you.
Touché, and since you have a taste for fencing, let us fence with facts. When did you last enter the study? And did you at any point remain there alone?
I entered when your hostess showed us the prints, and I remained only long enough to admire the line work, and I was never alone. How? Unless you count the moment when the colonel stepped away to cough.
I did cough, Holmes, because the study reeks of cigar smoke and varnish, and I am not ashamed of lungs that object to fashionable pollution.
A cough is not shameful, Colonel, but it can be convenient because it draws eyes and turns bodies away, which gives hands a moment of freedom.
The colonel's jaw tightened, and I saw the strain of a man unused to being treated as a variable in another's equation.
Mr. Holmes, this manner of questioning is unseemly, and I beg you to remember that we are not heathens in an alley, but Christian souls gathered in friendship.
Reverend, I respect your profession, but I do not share your confidence in Christian souls. For I have seen too many of them cheat at cards and then pray for forgiveness as if prayer were a receipt.
At that, Mr. Percival Shaw gave a small, thin laugh, and it struck me as oddly timed, like a man stepping on a stage cue.
Mr. Bah, Shaw, you laugh as if this were entertainment. Yet you are an art dealer, and art dealers, in my experience, are always entertained by the price of things.
Surely, Holmes, you cannot begrudge me a little humour to soften a tense evening. And besides, jewels are not my trade, unless one counts the tasteful brooches worn by patrons.
Your trade is desire, Mr. Shaw, and desire has many faces. Now, would you mind showing me your hands, palms, and nails, as if you were a schoolboy caught stealing jam?
Shaw hesitated, just a breath too long, before extending his hands.
There is a faint green dust beneath your right thumbnail, Mr. Shaw, which suggests you have recently handled a stone that sheds microscopic flecks along its setting.
That is absurd, Holmes, and you are making tricks with candlelight and imagination, because I have handled nothing but wine glasses and polite conversation.
Imagination is Watson's weakness, not mine, Inspector. Bring your lamp closer, and Watson, if you would be so kind, hold Mr. Shaw's hand steady without breaking it.
I complied, though I confess the physical contact made me uneasy, for Shaw's skin was cold and slightly moist, like a man who had been running in secret.
The dust is real, and now we shall ask how it arrived there. Did you, perhaps, attempt to open the cabinet and catch your nail on the velvet as you withdrew?
You are turning a speck into a gallows, Holmes, and I will not stand for it, because I have done nothing except what any guest might do in a host's house.
You have done one uncommon thing, Mr. Shaw. You have the faint scent of valerian on your cuffs, and valerian is used to entice cats, which explains how the animal came to be your accomplice.
At the mention of Valerian, Lady Winterbourne pressed a hand to her throat, and Miss Shaw's calm broke, if only by a hair.
Valerian, you say Mr. Bilerium, Holmes, and you speak as if my brother was sprinkling cat attractant like sugar. Yet you forget that half the fashionable world keeps such tinctures to soothe nerves.
Precisely, Miss Shaw, and the other half keeps them to manipulate animals. And your brother's tincture is not on a lady's handkerchief, but rubbed into his cuffs where a cat would nuzzle.
By God, Shaw, if you have brought us into a sordid business, you will answer to me, because I will not have my name splashed in mud by a man who sells paintings to gamblers.
Hold your tongue, Grease, for you know nothing. And Holmes, if you are so clever, find the jewel, because accusing me does not conjure it back onto the velvet.
You are correct, Mr. Shaw. Accusation is merely noise without recovery. So let us follow the cat's path, for I suspect the jewel has already left this house.
Holmes crossed to the hearthrug, where a small smear of grey ash lay, and he knelt, drawing from it a tiny loop of fine thread.
This is stage thread, Watson. The sort used in theatres to raise a ghostly lantern or move a prop without visible hand, and it is fresh, which means the theft was performed with theatrical contrivance.
The anonymous letter's phrase returned to me. The cat's eye would blink for me. and I felt, with sudden certainty, that we had stepped into a drama written by someone who enjoyed applause.
Lady Winterbourne, is there a theatre connection among your guests, or among your servants, or among those who have lately sought your patronage?
Colonel Rookwood sits on a charity board that funds performances for veterans, and Miss Shaw attends the opera. But beyond that, I know of nothing. Unless you count my husband's fondness for amateur dramatics.
Amateur dramatics are often the training ground for professional deceit, Colonel. Did your charity board recently engage any stagehands or illusionists who might have learned of this jewel?
We engaged a man named Silas Mon, Holmes, a fellow with nimble fingers who claimed he could make coins vanish to delight the wounded, and I confess I disliked him at once.
Silas Mon. Yes, I have heard of him. A conjurer turned burglar, and if he is involved, the jewel may already be headed for a fence near the river.
Holmes rose with sudden decision, his languor shedding like a cloak, revealing the keen energy beneath.
Inspector, you will keep these people here and prevent melodrama from becoming murder, while Watson and I follow the only witness that does not lie, the cat.
Follow a cat, Mr. Beanins, Mr. Chunks, Holmes, and you expect me to take that seriously when I have constables and warrants and the Queen's authority behind me?
You have authority, Inspector, but I have results, and results, I find, are more persuasive than uniforms. So kindly do as you are told.
With that, Holmes whistles softly, and to my amazement, the black cat, which had slipped into the hallway, trotted back as if summoned by a familiar signal.
There, Watson, you see, it has been trained, and now we shall discover by whom, because training leaves trails as surely as footprints do.
We followed the creature out into the garden, where damp soil darkened the paths and the shrubs shivered under a chilly wind. The cat moved with purpose, not prowling, not hunting, but navigating, and it led us toward the glass house at the far end of the grounds.
Observe the broken twig here, Watson, and the pressed grass there, for even in a garden, haste writes its story plainly.
Inside the glass house, warmth struck our faces, and the air smelled of wet earth and exotic plants. Cameras, and near the stove, I saw a small wooden box half hidden beneath a bench.
Do not touch it yet, Watson, because boxes often carry surprises, and surprises are better met with caution than courage.
Holmes lifted the lid with his cane, and within lay not the cat's eye, but a folded playbill, damp and crumpled, bearing the name of a music hall on the Strand.
The Strand, of course, where applause is bought and secrets are sold. And now the adventure leaves Kensington and enters the city's brighter, dirtier heart.
The cat rubbed against Holmes's leg, and Holmes, without looking down, murmured as if to it directly, "Biting go!"
You have done well, my nocturnal friend, but your master is impatient, and we shall pay him a visit before the curtain falls.
As we hurried back toward the street, I felt the case gather speed like a carriage rolling downhill, and I knew, with that particular dread and exhilaration, that London's night would not be quiet for us. The hansom bore us toward the Strand as twilight deepened, and the gas lamps flared into life like rows of watchful eyes, casting their jaundiced glow upon faces that hurried past in search of pleasure or escape. Holmes sat opposite me, chin tucked, eyes distant. Yet I could tell by the set of his mouth that his mind raced through possibilities with the cold joy of a mathematician nearing proof.
A jewel theft with a trained cat and stage thread, Watson, is not merely crime. It is performance, which means the culprit craves control and an audience, and we shall deny him both.
I tried to summon my own deductive reasoning, recalling Holmes's constant instruction, and I ventured, with careful phrasing, lest I offer him a sentence too short for your constraints and too foolish for his patience. If the thief is theatrical and known to Colonel Rookwood, then Silas Mon might have used the charity show as reconnaissance, and Mr. Percival Shaw, being an art dealer, could serve as his respectable channel to sell the stone.
A respectable channel, yes. And your thought is almost sound, Watson. Watson, except you still think in straight lines when criminals prefer circles. When
Holmes leaned forward as the cab slowed near a music hall whose painted facade shouted gaiety while its doorways swallowed men into shadow.
the cat's eye is too famous to sell openly, so it must be altered or hidden, and alteration requires a jeweler, while hiding requires a place where one may move unseen.
The music hall's entrance was a riot of posters and barkers, and laughter spilled out mixed with cigarette smoke and the faint brassy wheeze of a cornet. Holmes paid the driver and drew me into the crowd. One-eyed dear, his posture instantly changing from consulting detective to idle gentleman, as if he put on disguises without costumes.
We shall not enter by the front, Watson, because the front is for customers and policemen, and I prefer to be neither when I seek truth.
He led me down a narrow alley beside the theatre, where refuse bins and damp brick conspired to sour the air, and there, Cologne, half hidden behind a rain barrel, a stage door stood ajar.
Observe the fresh chalk mark on the lintel, Watson, a conjurer's sign to guide his fellows. Eh! And tell me what you deduce from that.
I deduce that Silas Mon expects company, and that this hall is not merely a place of entertainment but a meeting point for those who speak in codes and prefer not to be seen.
Better, Watson, because you have moved from noticing to inferring, and that is the whole theory of deduction, from small truths to larger ones without the weak bridge of wishful thinking.
We slipped inside, moving through dim corridors where ropes hung like vines and the floorboards creaked with a tired protest.
Who the devil are you, prowling where you do not belong? Because the next man I find here without a pass will meet my boot and not my hospitality.
You are Mr. Blinched the stage manager, and you have ink on your left thumb and grease on your right cuff, which means you write schedules and move scenily, and therefore you are exactly the man I require.
That's a fine speech, sir, but it does not answer my question. And I have no time for cleverness when the curtain is due in 10 minutes.
Then you have even less time for crime. I am Sherlock Holmes, and I am looking for Silas Mon, because he has misplaced something that does not belong to him.
At Holmes's name, the man's bravado wavered, for even among the backstage roughs, Holmes's reputation traveled like a whispered warning.
I know of no Silas Mon, Mr. Holmes, and if you keep me from my duties, the audience will riot and you will have more trouble than a jewel is worth.
You know him because you just lied, and your eyes flicked to the trapdoor at your feet, which means your trouble is already beneath you.
Before Brinch could shout, Holmes's hand darted, pressing two fingers to the man's wrist in a grip that was not cruel yet was utterly commanding.
You will remain quiet, Mr. Blinch, because if you do not, I shall make your wrist remember me for a week, and that would impede your precious schedules.
All right. Keep your temper, sir, and I'll not raise a sound. But I'll tell you plain, there are men down there I do not wish to cross.
Men who prefer shadows, which makes them excellent targets for a man who studies shadows as if they were letters in a book.
Holmes lifted the trapdoor and a stale breath rose from below, heavy with sweat, cheap gin, jeep, and something medicinal that pricked the nostrils. A ladder descended into darkness, and I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the soldier's instinct that says danger lies below and duty says descend.
Keep close, Watson, and keep your revolver ready, though if you fire, do try to hit the man you intend, because stray bullets are the clumsiest form of deduction.
We climbed down into a basement chamber lit by a single lantern where men sat at tables playing cards, and a thin figure in a velvet waistcoat stood apart, polishing a coin as if it were his soul.
Well now, the famous Mr. Holmes come to applaud my little enterprises, and with a doctor too, as if you expect someone to bleed before the encore.
Silas Mon, you have the hands of a conjurer and the conscience of a rat, and somewhere near you is a jewel that belongs to Lady Winterbourne.
Lady Winterbourne, you say, and you speak her name with such confidence, as if high-born women never lose things, and low-born men never find them.
Mon's eyes glittered, and I saw then the peculiar vanity Holmes had predicted, the showman's delight in being recognized even as villain.
You did not find it, Mon. You stole it, and you used a trained cat, stage thread, and valerian, which means you planned it with care and executed it with speed.
Planning is artistry. Mr. Holmes, an artistry deserves payment. And if the world insists on worshipping stones, then the world should not complain when a priest takes an offering.
Spare me your philosophy, because it is merely greed in a borrowed coat. Where is the cat's eye? Aye, and do not waste my patience with theatrics.
The cat's eye has blinked for me, Holmes, and it will blink again for another buyer. And by the time you return to Kensington, you'll find nothing but an empty niche and a bruised pride.
Holmes's gaze swept the basement, counting exits, weapons, and men, and I saw his mind choose a route through danger with the same calm precision he used to choose a chemical solution.
There is a side door behind you with damp hinges, suggesting recent use. And your boots carry river mud, suggesting you have been to a wharf within the hour.
You talk too much, Holmes, and talk makes men thirsty. So perhaps I'll have my lads pour you a drink you won't enjoy.
Your lads are nervous because they are criminals, not soldiers, and they will scatter if they believe the police are above, which they are, because I left a message for Inspector Lestrade on my way here.
That last statement was delivered with such serene certainty that even I nearly believed it, though I had seen no such message delivered. Oh!
Watson, at the count of 3, overturn the lantern, because darkness is the one costume in which you might outshine me.
I understood at once, and though my heart hammered, I forced my hand steady. Mormon steadiness is the only prayer worth saying.
1, 2, 3. And now, gentlemen, let us see whether you can fight without an audience.
I lunged and struck the lantern, and it toppled, oil flaring briefly before the flame died, plunging the room into chaos and curses. In the dark, bodies collided, chairs scraped, and a fist grazed my cheek. But I kept low and moved toward the sound of Mon's voice.
You'll regret that, Doctor, because I always hated men who meddle in tricks they do not understand.
You misunderstand, Mon, because this is no trick, it is deduction in motion, and you have just placed yourself exactly where I wanted you.
There was a sharp thud, the unmistakable sound of Holmes's cane meeting bone, and then Mon hissed in pain.
Your pocket, Mon, is heavier on the left, and that heaviness is not coins, because coins jingle, and yours do not.
Curse you, Holmes, you're like a devil in the dark, and I swear I'll.
I caught Mon's arm, and between my grip and Holmes's relentless pressure, we forced him against the wall.
Watson, strike a match, and let us see what our performer has concealed behind his velvet.
My trembling fingers found a matchbox, and I sparked a flame. The small light revealed Mon's face twisted with fury, and Holmes's hand already within the man's coat.
Here it is not, which means it is elsewhere, which means you have passed it on already. And now your cleverness has become your noose.
I passed nothing on, Holmes, because I do not trust buyers until I have their money, and I do not trust money until I can smell it.
Then you have hidden it nearby, perhaps in a frock chest, perhaps in a costume, perhaps even on the cat itself, which you use as courier because no one suspects an animal.
At the mention of the cat, Mon's eyes flicked upward, and Holmes saw it too. And without another word, he sprang toward a staircase leading to the stage above.
Up, Watson, because the jewel is about to cross the footlights, and I refuse to let a thief take a bow with Lady Winterbourne's property.
We burst onto the side of the stage as music swelled, and the audience laughed at a clown's pratfall. Ha ha! Unaware that a far more dangerous performance had just begun behind the curtain. The stage lights dazzled after the basement dark, and the painted scenery, bright cottages, and absurdly blue skies seemed almost insulting in its cheerfulness. Holmes moved like a shadow along the wings, avoiding the actors who pranced and sang, while stagehands hauled ropes overhead with indifferent strength.
Look for the cat, Watson, because a courier must appear before the delivery, and this delivery, whole, I suspect, is meant to happen in full view without being seen.
My eyes scanned the clutter of props, trunks, hoops, false swords, and a glittering cabinet used in some illusion, and then I saw it, the black cat perched atop a trunk near a man in a red waistcoat.
That man is no stagehand, Watson, because he wears kid gloves under his costume. Ha 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 ha! And only someone handling valuables wears gloves where no audience can see them.
The man's profile turned, due, and I recognized with a jolt the sharp nose and neatly trimmed mustache of Mr. Percival Shaw. He stood there, as if he belonged, offering a coin to the cat, and the cat, obedient as any trained performer, leaned forward, its collar glinting.
There is your circle, Watson, not a line Mons steals, Shaw legitimizes, and the theatre provides cover, applause, and a dozen exits.
Holmes stepped out, not rushing, but walking, as though he had every right to be on that stage, which in a sense he did, for he was about to end the act.
Mr. Shaw, you are admirably versatile, selling art by day and fencing jewels by night. Yet I fear your newest acquisition will not remain in your catalogue.
Holmes, you meddling insect, you have no authority here, and if you cause a scene, the crowd will tear this place apart before you find your precious stone.
The crowd will see only what the spotlight tells them, Shaw, and the spotlight is not presently on us, which makes this the safest place in London for quiet truth.
Shaw's hand darted toward the trunk, and I saw the glint of something metallic, perhaps a small pistol suited for close quarters. Instinct and service took me, and I stepped between him and Holmes, my voice firm, though my pulse roared in my ears. Mr. Shaw, you will put that weapon away, because I have faced rifles in Afghanistan and I will not be threatened by a toy head in the monk costumes.
A brave speech, Doctor, and quite wasted. Because bravery does not stop lead, and lead is very democratic, in whom it kills.
Democracy is charming, Shaw, but your hand shakes, which means you have not killed before, which means you will hesitate, which means you will lose.
Holmes's cane snapped upward, striking Shaw's wrist with surgical precision, and the pistol clattered into a prop bucket with a hollow, comic sound. The cat leapt, startled, and as it did, Pothas, something small and green flashed at its collar, caught in a tiny sewn pouch.
Watson, the pouch, because the jewel rides the cat like a crown, and we must take it gently unless you prefer to be clawed into humility.
I moved slowly, murmuring nonsense soothingly, and the cat, perhaps recognizing Holmes's earlier kindness, allowed me to grasp the pouch and unfasten it. So the cat's eye slid into my palm, cold and heavy, and even in that backstage half-light, it seemed to shimmer with an inner pulse, as if alive to the drama of its own recovery. And ambitious of Prector.
Elementary, as I warned you from the beginning, because criminals may be clever, but they are rarely original, and originality is the one quality I never underestimate.
You have it then, and you think you have won, but you forget, Holmes, that people like Lady Winterbourne are not ruined only by theft, they are ruined by stories.
Stories are Watson's province, Shaw, and he is kinder than I, but I am practical, and I shall prevent your story from reaching her doorstep.
Shaw laughed bitterly, his bravado collapsing into spite, and behind us I heard the muffled roar of the audience as the onstage performance reached some comedic climax.
You cannot stop gossip, Holmes, because gossip is London's true religion, and it will kneel at any scandal offered to it.
Perhaps, but I can redirect it, which is a form of control even priests envy. Now, Shaw, you will come with us quietly, and you sign a confession that places all blame upon yourself and mourn.
Confession, you say, as if I would destroy myself to spare a lady's pride, when her pride is built on the backs of men like me.
You will confess because the alternative is worse. I shall reveal not merely this theft, but the dozen smaller crimes by which you have fed your respectability, including the forged provenance you sold to Sir Lionel last year.
Sir Lionel's name, spoken there, landed like a drop plate, and Shaw's face drained of color, for blackmail is most potent when it is true.
You have no proof of that, Holmes, and even if you did, Greaves would deny it until his dying breath.
Proof is a flexible thing, Shaw, but fear is reliable, and you are afraid, which means you will do as I say.
Shaw's shoulders sagged, and in that moment he looked less villain than weary man caught by the consequences of his own hunger.
Watson, take the jewel and step back, because I will not have it damaged if this man decides to salvage dignity with violence.
I tucked the cat's eye securely into my inner pocket, feeling its weight like responsibility itself, and I watched Holmes guide Shaw toward the stage door with a hand that was firm yet oddly devoid of cruelty.
You see, Watson, the goal is not to punish for sport, but to restore order. And order is merely truth put back where it belongs.
We delivered Shaw to a waiting constable, whom Holmes summoned with a sharp whistle and a few murmur, the instructions. The ease of it suggesting that Holmes had indeed laid preparations beyond my knowledge. Yet, even as Shaw was taken away, a new complication arrived, though, as all true adventures insist upon providing.
Bravo, Mr. Holmes. A splendid finale, but you have forgotten that every showman keeps a last trick, and mine is to vanish before the applause fades.
Mon appeared at the alley mouth, his face bruised, his smile intact, and in his hand he held a small glass vial that caught the lamplight like liquid menace.
Do not be melodramatic, Mon. Mon, because poison is a vulgar shortcut taken by men who lack imagination, and you, by your own account, worship imagination.
Imagination, Holmes, is knowing that you and your doctor will hesitate to chase a man who might spill death in a crowded street.
The alley behind him opened onto the Strand's throng, and I realized with sudden alarm that one thrown vial could cause panic, injury, and perhaps worse, and Mon knew it.
Watson, your choice is simple. Protect the crowd or catch the criminal. And since you are a doctor, you will choose the crowd, which is why Mon thinks he can escape.
Holmes's voice was calm, but I heard in it the hard edge of calculation, and I understood that he was already planning to defeat Mon's last trick without sacrificing innocence.
Mon, you will not throw that vial, because if you do, I shall shout, fire, and the stampede will crush more than your poison ever could, and that blood will be on your conscience if you possess such a thing.
You are a cold man, Holmes, and cold men make dangerous bargains. But perhaps you are right that I dislike messy endings.
For a heartbeat, the three of us held still, like figures in a tableau, the vial poised, the jewel safe, the city indifferent.
Put it down, Mon, and I will let you keep one thing, your illusion that you almost won.
Almost won, you say, and that almost is the cruelest word in any language. But very well, Mr. Fondotich. Holmes, I will not poison strangers for the sake of my pride.
Mon's fingers loosened, the vial lowering, and in that fraction of surrender, Holmes moved fast as a striking snake, his cane hooking Mon's wrist. The vial flew, not into the street, but into a puddle where it shattered with a harmless hiss, and Mon, off balance, stumbled forward into my grasp.
There, Watson, you see how deduction becomes action. Anticipate the choice, shape the outcome, and the villain's last trick becomes merely another line in the script.
As we held Mon for the constable, I felt the night's tension begin to ebb, yet I knew we still must return to Winterbourne House and stitch together not only the jewel but the torn fabric of reputation. The journey back to Kensington felt longer than it had any right to, as if London itself wished to delay the moment when truth re-entered polite society. Holmes sat opposite me, composed, while I could not help fingering the jewel through my coat, feeling its hard certainty like a heartbeat that was not my own.
You're thinking, Watson, that the case is finished because the jewel is recovered. But in truth, the harder work begins now because society fears scandal more than theft.
I admitted as much, and I chose my words carefully, determined that even my agreement would not be brief enough to offend the strict form you require. I am thinking that returning the cat's eye is only half the cure, Holmes, because Lady Winterbourne's household has been pierced and her guests will carry whispers like contagion into every drawing room.
Precisely. and so we shall prescribe a remedy suited to that illness, a story cleaner than the truth, yet close enough to it that no one can contradict it without implicating themselves.
Winterbourne House received us again in turmoil, though now the air tasted different, less like panic and more like exhausted dread. Inspector and constables stood about with that official stiffness which suggests authority, even when authority has been outpaced, and the
Inspector, you may congratulate yourself, because by the time morning comes, you will have arrested Silas Morn, known rogue, and Percival Shaw, known swindler, and the public will applaud your diligence.
if I applaud anything, Mr. Holmes, it is that you brought the jewel back, though I still maintain you court danger like it's a sweetheart and not a grave.
Danger, and I have an understanding, Inspector. And now I require a private word with Lady Winterbourne and her husband, because reputations are more fragile than glass vials.
We were ushered into the study, where Lord Winterbourne, a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes, stood by the cabinet as if guarding it with his body.
Mr. Holmes, my wife tells me you have pursued this matter, and I confess I find the whole thing intolerable, because I cannot have thieves making a stage of my home.
Nor can I, my lord, which is why I prefer to end the performance decisively. Watson, if you please, return the cat's eye to its velvet bed.
I produced the jewel, and Lady Winterbourne gasped softly, her composure cracking at last, and I saw tears gather, though she tried to master them.
It is truly back, and you do not know what weight you have lifted, Mr. Holmes, because this stone was not merely property, it was trust given to me.
Trust is best placed in people, madam, not in cabinets, but I take your meaning. And now we shall discuss how to keep your house from being blamed for what was, in truth, an external conspiracy.
External conspiracy, you say, and I would like to believe it, Holmes, because if the theft came from within, if my servants or my guests, then I do not know how I should ever host a friend again.
The theft was orchestrated by Silas Morn, aided by Percival Shaw, and facilitated by your guests only in the sense that polite gatherings provide cover and predictable movement. Your maid is innocent of intent, though she is guilty of believing too readily in the virtue of fashionable visitors, which is a common mistake among honest people.
Thank you, sir, and I will remember that lesson as long as I live, because fear has carved it into me deeper than any sermon could.
Holmes turned then to Lord Winterbourne, and his tone softened, not into sentiment or code, into something like pragmatic respect.
My lord, the public explanation will be as follows. You received an anonymous threat. You informed Scotland Yard quietly, and an attempted theft was foiled through vigilance and police action. The truth includes your guests, and a trained cat, and a theatre. But the public does not need that embroidery, and your family's name will be spared. Needless spectacle.
And what of Sir Lionel Holmes, because he's already furious, and fury, in my experience, leaks into conversation no matter how one tries to cock it.
Sir Lionel will remain quiet because his purchase of forged provenance from Shaw is a secret he not afford to see daylight, and I shall remind him of that fact with a letter written in very polite ink.
Lady Winterbourne stared at Holmes as if seeing him anew, not merely as detective, but as strategist of the social battlefield.
You would manipulate society's lies to preserve society's peace, Mr. Holmes, and I cannot decide whether that is admirable or frightening.
It is neither, madam. It is necessary, because civilization is a thin coat of varnish, and London would rather polish varnish than repair the wood beneath.
Lord Winterbourne exhaled, the sound of a man releasing the worst of his dread, and he offered Holmes his hand with awkward sincerity.
Then I am in your debt, Mr. Holmes, and while I dislike owing debts, I dislike disgrace more. So name your fee and be done.
My fee is simple. Improve the cabinet mechanism. Dismiss any notion that wealth is protection. And if you must keep jewels, keep also the humility to know they attract wolves.
That, I confess, struck me as unusually modern for Holmes and use, and I saw Lady Winterbourne look at him with something like gratitude that did not require words. When we returned to Baker Street later, the city's noise felt distant, muffled by fatigue, and Mrs. Hudson's lamp in the sitting room shone like a promise of ordinary life resume.
Sit, Watson, and tell me what you learned, for if you cannot articulate it, then you have not truly observed it.
I sat, and though I was tired, I forced my mind to retrace the case, haze, to turn it into lessons rather than mere excitement. I learned that the smallest details like Valerian on a cuff or stage threadinage can outweigh the loud declarations of innocence, and that criminals often rely on the blindness of respectable people.
Good. And what else, Watson? Because you are still circling the point without landing upon it.
I learned that crime is not always brute force, but sometimes theatre, and that the thief who loves performance will build a scheme that is clever only because it assumes no one will look behind the curtain.
Better, Watson. And now the final step. You learned that deduction is not a parlor game, but the discipline of refusing comforting explanations until the uncomfortable truth is proven.
Holmes rose then, and without another word took up his violin, drawing from it a slow, surging melody that seemed to echo the cat's-eyes shifting light. As he played, I watched the fire's glow flicker on the mantel and thought of that green jewel resting again in its velvet niche, as if nothing had happened. Yet something had happened, for London had revealed, once more, its dual nature: bright facades masking basements, laughter drowning danger, and polite hands capable of theft when temptation is dressed as art.
Watson, you will write this one down, and you will call it The Adventure of the Cat's Eye. But do try to resist making me sound like a romantic hero.
I smiled despite myself, because even after all our adventures, Holmes still feared sentiment as if it were an infection, and perhaps that was why his clarity remained so sharp. I answered him with the honest affection of a friend who knows he will be ignored and yet speaks any way. Careful again that my line should not be short, for you demanded length and life together. My dear Holmes, if I make you sound heroic, it will be because the truth of your mind is heroic in its own strange way, and if that troubles you, then you should have been less brilliant.
Then I shall endeavor to be dull tomorrow, Watson. Though I warn you, dullness does not suit me, and London has a habit of refusing to let me rest.
The violin's note rose, the fire crackled, and outside, the city rolled on, indifferent and hungry, as if already preparing its next mystery to lay at our doorstep.